Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're zeroing in on the very first moves of the newly elected Pope Leo XIV. You probably know him as Robert Francis Prevost until recently.
Exactly. And we've got this Fox News report to work with titled, Pope Leo XIV's mention of synodal church sparks striking similarity to Pope Francis's papacy.
Right, so our mission today is to sort of unpack what these initial statements, these symbolic choices, might be telling us about where his papacy could be headed.
Especially thinking about, Pope Francis's recent legacy and also the much longer view, the historical traditions of the papacy.
These early moments are always so revealing, aren't they? It's like trying to read the first clues.
Definitely. It feels like reading the first chapter. This Fox News piece gives us some really crucial starting points.
Okay, let's dive right in then. His introductory remarks, the report mentions he spoke in Italian and Spanish.
Yeah, which is a nice touch, definitely inclusive.
But the big thing, according to this article anyway, was his speech being concise and focused on, quote, building bridges and hope for a synodal church.
Ugh, that term, synodal church. That immediately makes you think of Pope Francis, doesn't it?
It really does. The report points out that direct parallel, saying he mentioned a missionary church that includes everyone, which is very much Pope Francis's language.
And they pull out that key quote. Let me see. To all you brothers and sisters of Rome, Italy, of all the world, we want to be a synodal church.
Walking and always seeking peace, charity, closeness.
Especially to those who are suffering. Putting synodal church front and center like that right away, that feels significant.
It does. And Fox News brings in Dennis Doyle, professor emeritus at the University of Dayton, to help us understand why.
Right, and Doyle highlights how much Pope Francis really pushed this idea of synodality.
So for Pope Leo XIV to pick up that language so quickly, well, it reads like a very deliberate signal of continuity, wouldn't you say?
I think so. But what does synodal church really mean, like in practice? How would that work day to day?
That's the question, isn't it?
Well, you can think of it as a move towards a more collaborative way of doing things in the church. More listening, maybe.
More dialogue at different levels, from parishes up to the Vatican.
Exactly. Pope Francis really emphasized involving lay people more, bishops working together more closely. He was trying to shift away, perhaps, from a purely top-down model.
Towards something where decisions are discerned more broadly.
Precisely. So for Pope Leo XIV to highlight that concept so early on, it really suggests he wants to keep that spirit going.
Okay, so that's one strong signal continuity with Francis on collaboration. But then the article pivots to his appearance.
The visual symbols.
Yes. It notes he wore the traditional gear, the red mozzetta, the white cassock.
And contrast that with Pope Francis's first appearance, which was described as, notably absent of adornments.
Right, so this visual choice, it feels like it might be sending a slightly different message, maybe?
It certainly adds another layer, doesn't it? As Doyle says in the article, he's signaling he intends to be traditional in some ways.
So this visual connection to past popes, could that be an attempt to reassure some people, those who maybe felt tradition was being overlooked?
It could be. It does raise that question. Is this a deliberate move to sort of, bridge different perspectives within the church?
That's an interesting thought, and it makes me think about other early choices Pope Francis made, like not living in the apostolic palace.
Right. The article reminds us he chose the Domus Sanctae Marthae instead. That was a break from tradition.
So I wonder, will Pope Leo XIV follow Francis there or go back to the palace? It seems small, but like we're saying, these early choices can be pretty symbolic.
Absolutely. Where a pope lives can say a lot about his priorities, his style, his relationship with the established structures.
Pope Francis's move was seen as a statement about humility, maybe a different kind of engagement.
Yes, so whether Pope Leo XIV continues that or reverts will be another little clue about his personal vision for the papacy.
Now, the Fox report also touches on where Leo XIV might differ from Francis. Doyle suggests some of Francis's actions alienated traditionalists.
Right, and he connects that back to the traditional attire we just talked about, suggesting it could be a hint of a different approach there.
It's subtle, but maybe this visual signal is an attempt to heal some of those perceived rifts, or at least acknowledge them.
It's certainly plausible. The church is huge, incredibly diverse, and different groups reacted differently to Pope Francis.
So maybe Leo XIV, by using this traditional visual right away, is trying to signal perhaps a kind of balance. Respect for different ways of being Catholic?
It could be read that way.
Yeah.
A delicate balancing act, maybe? trying to foster unity across that whole spectrum.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's talk about the man himself, Robert Francis Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV.
The first North American pope. That's a big historical marker right there.
It really is. And the article gives us some background. Ordained 82, led the Augustinians in Chicago.
And crucially, prefect of the dicastery for bishops under Pope Francis. Francis made him a cardinal just last year.
That close working relationship with Pope Francis seems incredibly relevant, doesn't it? What does that tell us?
Well, it means he has direct, recent experience right inside the Vatican, especially overseeing who becomes a bishop. That gives him a really intimate understanding of the church's leadership landscape.
And the direction Francis is steering things.
Exactly. He wasn't an outsider coming in. He was a key figure in the previous administration. So his election probably signals, a desire for some level of continuity, at least in how the church is governed.
Okay, now let's talk about the name, Leo.
Yes, Leo XIV.
The article says it's unclear which of the previous 13 Leos he particularly admires, but it floats Leo the Great, Leo I, and especially Pope Leo XIII.
And Leo III is specifically mentioned because of his encyclical Rerum Novarum.
Right. Let's really unpack that. Rerum Novarum. Why is that encyclical still talked about? Why might it influence a papal name choice now?
Rerum Novarum. Okay,
Oh.
it translates from Latin as On Revolutionary Changes.
Yeah.
It came out in 1891. You have to picture the world back then.
Industrial Revolution in full force. Huge social changes.
Exactly. Massive upheaval. New ideas like socialism, communism were spreading, offering different ways to organize society, especially in response to the conditions workers faced.
So Leo III felt the church had to weigh in on all this.
Precisely. He saw the changes, the struggles of the working class, and believed the church needed to offer a moral framework. The article rightly notes Rerum Novarum criticized socialism, meaning basically communism at that time, arguing it clashed with the natural right to own property.
Okay, so it's important context that socialism then often meant something very specific, tied to Marxist ideas.
Yes, very important distinction. But Rerum Novarum did much more than just critique. It laid down foundational principles for Catholic social teaching that we still discuss today.
Like what?
Things like the dignity of work, the right of workers to a just wage, the role of the state in promoting the common good, even the right to form unions. It basically created a Catholic framework for engaging with modern economic and social questions.
Wow. So choosing the name Leo, especially with Leo XIII legacy, could signal a focus on applying those social teachings to today's problem.
It could very well.
Right.
Perhaps building on, or maybe even refining, how Pope Francis addressed issues like poverty and inequality. It connects the papacy back to that tradition of social engagement.
That's really interesting. So it's not just history, it's about using those principles now. Okay, bringing it all together, what's the overall sense from Dennis Doyle, the expert quoted in the Fox piece?
Doyle's takeaway, as the article presents it, is that Pope Leo XIV is likely to be a very balanced pope.
Balanced. That word seems to capture these early signs, doesn't it? The synodality echoing Francis, but the traditional visuals.
And the choice of a name with that deep historical weight, particularly around social issues, it suggests someone trying to hold different strands together.
Okay, so let's try to recap what we've pulled from this Fox News report. Pope Leo XIV starts with a strong emphasis on a synodal church, which really points towards continuing a key theme from Pope Francis.
Check. Continuity there.
But then his choice of traditional vestments, that hints at maybe a desire to connect with past practices, perhaps bridge some divides within the church.
Right. A nod to tradition.
And finally, the name Leo. It connects him to history, notably Pope Leo XIII, and that huge encyclical Rerum Novarum, which tackled the big social and economic issues of its day.
Exactly. So these first signals, they paint a fascinating, maybe complex picture. A new papacy seemingly trying to navigate between continuity and tradition.
Looking for that balance.
Potentially seeking a balanced path forward, yes.
Now, here's the final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. Given these early signs, the talk of synodality, the traditional clothes, the historical weight of the name Leo, how do you think Pope Leo XIV might actually manage that balance between keeping things going and making changes in the church?
And maybe which parts of that long papal history, like the legacy of someone like Leo XIII, might end up being most important in shaping his time as Pope?
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.